Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Homeschool Minnesota. My name is Dayle Annand. This podcast is a ministry and outreach of MACHE, Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators. I'm so excited to have you all with us. Thank you for joining us today. If you see us on video, you will see who my guest is. My guest is Andrew Pudewa. Now, many of you know him from IEW, Institute for Excellence in Writing, and many of you use him, love his method, use it in your family. And we're so grateful to Andrew for that. But we are flipping the script a little bit, and we're doing something a little different with him today. Today, we're going to talk about AI and how that affects us or doesn't affect us, and what pitfalls and benefits and all of it. Just a little overview of AI in education today. But first, let's introduce Andrew Pudewa. Thank you for joining us today, Andrew.
It is a pleasure.
I'm so excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. Let's see. Most important, I have 7 grown children, all of whom were homeschooled almost all the time. And I now have 18 plus one on the way grandchildren.
Wow.
All of whom who are school age are being homeschooled. So we're in the exponential second generation mode here, and that's a delight. I have had a chance to teach some classes to my grandchildren and their cousins and friends. And so that's been a delight to kind of get back in the classroom after several years of doing other things.
Sure.
Our company, Institute for Excellence in Writing, we're headquartered in eastern Oklahoma, and growth is good. We love the explosion of people wanting to find out alternatives to the public system.
Yeah.
And homeschooling, of course, growing. And one of my personal delights is to be able to support the state homeschool organizations whenever possible, because you guys are on the front lines of the preservation of basic freedoms. And
Wow.
so that's one thing I love. In terms of myself, I don't know what to say. I keep working on some new projects. My grandchildren think my full-time job is to play with them all the time. So I have to allocate time appropriately.
Yep.
But this topic of AI is a hot topic, and it's almost like as soon as I say something, there's new information, there's new
Yeah.
perspectives. And so this is both timely and will be dated very quickly, I'm sure.
Yeah. This will last about a week and a half. And by the time it comes out, it'll be like, well, that's obsolete. But we're just going to do our best, is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you about this. I recall you talking about how you looked yourself up on AI and was surprised. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, it was my son who
Okay.
asked ChatGPT about Andrew Pudewa.
Uh-huh.
And it had information about me that was mostly pulled off my bio on our website. But it also said that I had written a book entitled The Well-Trained Mind. And I, of
That's
course,
Susan Weiss-Bauer.
yeah, I was very aware that I had not written this book, and I was very aware that Susan had. And I thought that is really an error.
Yeah.
And of course, I can read it and know that's not true, but anybody else who might ask a similar question or a question about anybody and get information, they wouldn't have the knowledge to know that it wasn't a true thing. And I think that was my first kind of hit against the fact that this AI large language model is pulling information, but it has no discernment. It has no judgment. It has no ability to know if what it's pulling is true. And that strikes me as one of the real dangers of the thing. Is it can't have wisdom. It can only have a preponderance of information. And since then, I've had other interesting experiences of getting information that is clearly not true. And then when you go back and say, well, what's your source on that? It'll come back and say, sorry, I was wrong. So, I think at the moment, maybe it's in its adolescent phase and it's operating like a 12-year-old who believes that everything it thinks is true.
Yeah.
And it has no humility, or it's a weird thing. And obviously it's helping a lot of people do a lot of things and saving people a lot of time. But the real question is, how is the future of education going to be affected by, the capacities of what people claim or say AI will do for them.
Yeah, and what do you think that is, Andrew? I mean, I know that I've used AI. I do use AI regularly, not all the time. I generally use it as like a I'll write something and then I'll run it through AI to tweak it to make it sound a little bit better, and then I'll tweak it myself, and after a few passes I'm like, okay, this sounds good, this is what I was aiming for. But there are a lot of dangers, I think, educationally to AI. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as being downfalls or pitfalls that students or just parents can even fall into
Yeah, I think
regarding AI?
on the upside, it can customize lessons for students and move exactly at their pace and
Hmm.
give the perfect amount of repetition. I think, a closed, safe universe like math, it's
Yeah.
probably going to be very good as a math tutor tool. And we're already seeing that happening, and big money is going into business ideas and services that are going to customize tutoring for students. Um, so that's a closed universe. Language is a wild universe. The
Yeah.
infinite knowledge of the world, that's a lot different than math. And how well it will be is yet to know. But I think where we are right now is that people generally tend to take the path of least resistance. Like
Mm.
all of us do that. We have a task and we say, well, what's the quickest, easiest, most efficient, and reliably good way for me to get done this thing that I'm supposed to get done?
Right.
And, for us, for you and I who use it that way, I don't see a lot of danger, although I never really like what I get.
Yeah.
Whereas if I write it myself, I generally just keep working until I like it. So there's a dissatisfying nature of using it to write stuff for me. But when we scale this down to children, schools, education, and we say, okay, let's take, for example, the research project. Most of us did this, maybe we did it in middle school, high school years. And the idea was we had to go out and get several different sources of information on some historical event or some issue or current thing going on. And we would collect up information and we would have to do the sorting. We would have to say, okay, what's the validity of the source? How reliable? Where did it come from? Is it trustworthy? And maybe yes, maybe no. If no, then we want to not use that. We want to get a different source. Then we would
Yeah.
have to say, okay, where's my focus? And now what are the interesting, important, relevant facts? And we would choose those. And in our system with IEW, some people might know, we have this kind of mini research project where we create source outlines
Mhm.
and then create a fused outline. Old people like me, we did it in school with note cards. I don't know if you
Yes.
ever did that. You
Yes,
remember?
no, I totally am with you. I did my whole college career. We didn't even have computers really back then. That was so so it was like the card catalog in the library, having to scour books. It took hours to write a paper.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we would collect information and then we would prioritize and we would then figure out, okay, how do we put this together?
Mhm.
And then we would have to write it out in a way that was not just grammatically correct, but also supporting whatever thesis we might have and meeting the requirements of the assignments or the teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of thinking going on
Yes.
in that
Yeah.
process. And we could say, well, what was the value of it? Was it the product? Was it the paper we wrote and turned in? No, it's in the
Mm,
garbage. It's
mm.
long gone. It had no actual commercial or practical value. It was the experience we were
Yeah,
having
it was the
that
process.
helped form our capacity to
Mm.
collect up, organize, refine, present ideas.
Yeah.
So I fear that one of the things that we see is people saying, well, why teach kids to do that anymore when
Mhm.
these large language models can do that instantaneously and better than 99% of us? Why bother teaching it? So we would have to say, well, yeah, if you're just thinking about product, if it's entirely pragmatic or commercial, okay. But
Mhm.
children are not products, right?
Yeah.
Children are created in the image of God with
Yeah.
human faculties of language and reason and the application of logic and memory. And when we look at tools that are going to replace our mastery of language, our use of logic, our general knowledge, our human faculties, that's going to take a toll on us. And I like to use one really simple example because almost everybody can relate to this.
Hmm.
Before calculators existed, people knew how to do mental math much better.
Yes.
And, it was expected that you could make change in your mind. It was expected that you could do basic kind of multiplication or division or fractions,
Hmm.
that a normally literate high school graduate would be able to figure out, well, what is approximately 1/8 of 12,000
Hmm.
or something like that.
Right.
Now, when calculators came in, we weren't needing to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And gradually over time, education shifted to, well, we don't need to be able to do that because we have calculators. We just need to be sure that kids learn how to use calculators well. Okay,
Mm.
but let's just step back. You ask any person this question:
Yeah.
who's going to use a calculator better? Someone who can do a little bit of mental math, can think mathematically to some degree, has a good sense of number,
Mm.
or someone who can't?
Yeah.
Everyone will agree. And so now we see, unfortunately, mathematics, education has gone on an extreme decline with
Yes.
a few people at the very top. And they don't even attempt to get kids to do mental math, or in some cases, even master multiplication tables. Why? Because we have technology to do that. So the basic rule is technology will atrophy the skill which it replaces. You
Mm.
see the same thing in spelling, right? It used to be important to know how to spell the words of the language that you speak.
Yes.
And it would give you confidence in writing. It would give you an understanding of maybe the meaning or origin of words. It enriched you
Hmm.
as a person who, owns English to some degree to know how to spell the words.
Hmm.
Spell checkers come in, it's no longer important, except for those homonyms like there, and there, and
Yes.
read and all that. But now we don't even need that because
No.
AI knows what you're thinking and it just picks the right one. So why bother to learn to spell? So now many people don't, and they don't care, but they're in a way kind of impoverished because
Mm.
they're being deprived of this more intimate understanding and knowledge and experience of the very language that God gave them.
Wow.
Those are some of my concerns. I think more philosophical than technical, although
Yeah.
we can get into some of the technical problems as well.
Well, I'd like to stay for a minute on the philosophical because I think we had talked about it a little bit before the podcast about just the dumbing down of education and of kids and of people, to where there's like this laziness about things, where it's like, well, I just remembered a few years back the revolution was, well, we don't need to teach cursive writing. What's the point of cursive writing? There's no point in teaching it. Kids don't use it. They're always texting. They're using it's much better for us to teach them how to keyboard at a young age than it is
Yeah.
for us to teach them cursive writing. And then we realized, wait a minute, there's something of that physiologically works between the left brain and the right brain that we miss when we don't teach things like cursive writing and
Yeah.
handwriting, those fine motor skills that children are required to master to move on to the next level of thinking. And now they want to replace thinking. I'm just what do you I'm concerned about what are we losing when we're using so much technology in our education. Not that I don't think technology is bad. I absolutely think we need to teach our kids how to do these things. But I think that, like you said, it's impoverishing our students and just not really giving them the richness of problem solving. I think about how we don't give them the opportunity to be a problem solver and how that affects their future job, their future parenting, their future citizenship when they can't solve problems because problems just get solved for them.
It's interesting because, problem solving along with critical thinking are kind of buzzwords.
Yes.
And I almost don't like them because people bandy them about, especially in education,
Yeah.
that this is what we want. But both of those things require several components that technology cannot really provide.
Exactly.
Number one, uh, you have to have information to solve problems. You have to have information to think critically and make judgments. Essentially, critical thinking is having enough information and being open minded and humble
Mm-hmm.
to take it in, and given all the factors that are there, to make the best decision or the best judgment. And the more you know
Mm-hmm.
in general, and the more you know specifically, the better you're going to be able to make a judgment. Now, AI can take large amounts of information and give you a nice little outline of whatever length you want.
Yeah.
It can summarize extremely efficiently. And so we're saying, okay, too long, didn't read, give me the bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to make my problem solving, critical thinking judgments and decisions based on bullet points.
Yeah.
And that's just not likely to give the full depth of effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You and I probably both have had an experience of working or knowing people who are just phenomenally well educated.
Yes.
They know history, they
Super
know
intimidating.
languages, math. I have a couple people in my life, they're just Renaissance people,
Yeah.
and you interact with them and they come up with these really insightful statements,
Yeah.
and you think that's the result of a lifetime of study and diligence and the blessing of good intelligence.
Yes.
That's just not something that is easy to get artificially.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to get in reality. It's really hard to get artificially.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it just breaks down to character. What kind of character do you want to have? What kind of character do you want your children to have? And the character of having to find information and disseminate that information and then reproduce that information in a very cohesive way is something that you can't just get when you just type into chat gpt, help me write a paper on, on, I don't know, I guess the way that a atom splits, or the cell division, or something like that. And they can't really stop and think about it themselves, like, okay, how does that affect, this, and what about this part of the body, and mitochondria, and all these. I mean, they can't. It just gives you the information. You just put it on a piece of paper, and that's your assignment. And you're missing so much.
Well, and one of the dangers here too is that students, I believe, when they use technology to accomplish something, they still believe that they did it.
Yeah, yeah,
So you can use web search engines, get information, put it all together, and you did that. You can also just have now AI do all that for you, but you're duped into thinking that you learned something,
yes,
when in actuality, you really didn't learn anything except maybe the superficial level that you would get from reading anything
hmm,
and then being done with it. Although there are stories of some kids who turn in papers they didn't even read. They just turned in a paper which accidentally included the prompt that you gave the AI to write the paper.
yeah,
It's kind of crazy stuff. But I think that self deception is one of the tools of the evil one.
yes,
When we think about ourselves wrongly, especially when we move into that area of pride, like, well, I did this, we're just in very dangerous territory, spiritually, professionally, intellectually. Humility is
mm,
so important to character and
hmm,
really to success in life. The
yeah,
people that work in my company, the people who really do the best are the ones who have the most, practiced or ingrained or a combination thereof of teachability, of
mm,
knowing they don't know everything. I think AI, we could go down a real rabbit trail about, is there demonic influence in the AI systems?
sure,
And I think there's some pretty good arguments to support that idea. But from a purely objective, non spiritual point of view, the thing is not operating with any modicum of humility. And when we adopt that, we're bringing that profound lack of humility into our own mind and heart, and then out the door when we turn in the work that we supposedly were supposed to do. And so I view that as a problem. And I want to get right into this other one, because I think this is something even homeschool parents are going to see happening, and we have to prepare for it
Yeah.
somehow. I was listening to a little Instagram, and it hit home really well. It said there's really three kind of main categories of AI users. Old people, that would be me.
Yeah.
We use it
Right here.
mostly as a search engine.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it'll help me get information I need more efficiently. I like that. Good enough. Then there you've got your millennials, right? At the kind of at the peak of career. They're starting to use it more and more like an operating system. So I'm going to set this thing up so it will know what I need, order what I want, schedule my thing, do this all, and that'll save me a bunch of time because I won't have to figure all stuff. I'm not there yet. I actually like
Yeah.
doing my own stuff, but then
I still have a
I'm
paper planner that I use, so there you go.
but the third category are the young people,
Yes.
right? The Gen Z and Alpha. They are using it for companionship and therapy.
Yes.
They're trying to get life advice
Mm.
from a non-human entity that cannot have wisdom. And I view this as particularly dangerous because when you start having a primary relationship, a main important relationship in your life with a non-human entity, this is going to change the nature of your experience of being human. And I view this as probably the greatest danger we have. And yet you see all the time people are getting their, taking their therapy needs to ChatGPT. And some of the stories are pretty horrific of what
Yes.
the AI is telling them. So how do we protect our kids from falling into that trap?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a lot easier to talk to someone who is not going to respond emotionally
Mm-hmm.
than to actually deal with conflict or personal struggles
Mm.
with other real people. It's a
Yeah.
completely different experience.
Well, there's no confrontation. When you're talking to an AI, there's no confrontation there. It's just this is the information that you asked for, and you're hearing sometimes what you want to hear because you're getting the information you asked for rather than, well, I know you asked for this, but the reality is this. And yeah, and I know we lived in Japan a few years ago. My husband and I were missionaries there for several years, and one of the things that was just fascinating to us was they're very isolated, community minded, not very individualistic, but there's this trend happening where there was a man that actually married an AI character, like legally through the government, got the marriage license, the whole thing, and they just allowed him to, and this is who he comes home to every night, and this is his companion for life that he has chosen to spend his life with, which sounds so crazy and so strange, except that it's happening more and more and more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I know to us, it's like that will never become something that could be a danger to my child or to myself or to my friends or people that I know. But the fact is that without that healthy human interaction, where we already see it happening where people are avoiding conflict by just canceling people who don't agree with them and then veering towards people who do, and you can't even have a healthy discourse on topics that you don't agree with, and then you go into something that will just tell you what you want to hear and feed you the information that you're looking for. And as a side note, here's some conflicting things that, points of view on this, but you can ignore that if you want,
Yeah.
kind of a thing. And I just wonder at how healthy, and I mean, it's a long way from, I'm going to check my term paper that I wrote through AI to see if there's anything I can tweak, to that. However, it is a slippery slope is what we're trying to say, correct?
Yeah, I think we all are curious
Yeah.
about what are the capabilities, curious in a maybe pessimistic way, like how
Mhm.
bad can it actually get?
Yeah.
I'm kind of in that camp, quite honestly. I know a few people who are in the how good is it going to get
Yeah.
and how much better our lives are going to be. So,
I'm in the
you know,
middle, Andrew, where I think there's some good things about it, but there's also things you're going to be very careful of. But yeah.
but I do feel that when we are talking about the education part, we have to realize that a dependence on a technology is reflective of a lack of independence that we have.
Mm,
So if we're dependent on a technology to help us not die of boredom, which is what most kids today who are
yes.
born into this world believe they have a right to never be bored. and that it is the job of adults to be sure that they're never bored.
Mhm.
And the adults can't do that, so they default to technology. So here, screens.
Yes.
Nobody's ever bored. You're
Yes.
never bored anymore because you've got something to watch, something to look at.
Mhm.
And it's not even as though carrying around a book
Mhm.
and being in a book with your own mind and your thoughts, it's coming at you so powerfully,
Mm.
that it's wiping out our attention span, right?
Yes.
Attentiveness is a skill that is cultivated through reaching out, right? Attention, tenuo. It's the Latin verb meaning to reach out and grab, tenuo. And when everything's coming at us so fast, we don't have to exercise any will to attend to something. And so I think, we've become less independent in our ability to just be with ourselves and think and contemplate and read something. And how far will this go? And
Yeah.
and I believe what we're seeing is a stratification of people who can think
Mhm.
and everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's
Yep.
not good for a democratic society in
Mm-mm.
any way.
Mm-mm.
When you have this great disparity, you
Mhm.
know, we had a material disparity, then we had a educational disparity, but
Yes.
now we're actually seeing a thinking disparity,
Yeah.
and the world will be essentially controlled by the few people who've retained their ability to think and now control everything else, and then
Mhm.
everyone else who's getting all their thinking done for them almost all the time.
Mhm.
And that scares me from you know a societal, a social health perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what would be then, as a parent, bringing it back to homeschooling, as a parent, what would be your suggestion or thoughts about how do we responsibly address this issue with our kids? What are ways that we can responsibly, because this is something that is part of their world, they're going to need to know how to manage it and how to do it. But yet, how do we responsibly teach our kids about this and bring it into their lives a little bit?
Well, it seems like with any kind of screen-based technology, the best thing is to do stuff together with your kids. So if you're going to do, a web search for information so they can learn and write about something, do the searching together with them so you can help them develop the discernment to know, okay, which websites have which sorts of information. If you're going to allow them to access AI to get information, do it with them. And then if something looks, a little suspicious, maybe what do they call it? A hallucination.
Yeah.
It kind of makes up something to fill in the gap that it doesn't have. Well, then you can hopefully notice that, point it out, and just I think that's really the key to learning any new technology is doing it with your kids and helping them learn to navigate it. Whereas the tendency, I think is, well, go figure it out on your own.
Mhm.
But then there's just too many deep level
Yeah.
dangers that exist now. I think every one of us who has grown kids that, half my kids were born into really a pre-internet world and the
Mhm.
other half were born into the internet world. But I think every one of us would go back and say, I wish I had a lot more control over those screens when those kids were young. It
Yes.
it blindsided us. It took us by surprise. We didn't
Mhm.
realize the potential dangers, really, the potential problems, and keep all the screens in public places in the home and regulate the use and, make the rules. I think pretty much we all will be safer if we put more constraints rather than fewer, and then within those constraints, help them learn to use the tools as they become available.
Yeah.
And of course, kids learn how to use technology 10 times faster than their parents do. That's just this should be an axiom. There should be
Exactly.
what's that rule that says it'll double every so often? Well, kids' speed at picking it up will accelerate faster, but we still need to be involved
Mhm.
in the process as
Mhm.
much as possible.
And I think
But it's hard.
oh, it
I do not
is.
envy my kids who have young children born into this world today because we don't
So
know what things
rough.
are going to be like 10 years from now. We don't even know what things are going to be like 1 year from now.
Yeah, it changes so quickly. I think that this is the massive reason why character based education is so important.
Yes.
You cannot put enough emphasis on how important it is for us to teach our children godly character and what did God create us to do? Keeping in mind that all of this is available and possible because of human ingenuity in the first place, right? And so thinking about that and understanding that character-based education is just sometimes it's just the most important thing to teach your children is that we are thinkers, we are problem solvers. And while this is a tool, that's all it is. And it shouldn't be doing our thinking for us or our problem solving for us.
Yeah.
We need
Uh,
to bring that back.
and we learn the character from the great Western Christian tradition,
Yes.
through the literature, through the philosophy, the theology, but we also have need for applying that in our lives. And
Mhm.
I was listening to a guy I like very much, Simon Sinek. He wrote
Mhm.
a book about find your why. He's that find out why you're doing something, and you'll do it better. You'll
Yeah.
learn better. You'll accomplish more. And someone's saying, well, what do we tell our kids? How do we prepare them when we don't even know which jobs may or may not exist 10 years from now? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but
Mhm.
he said, teach them to relate to one another. Teach them to work out conflicts. Teach them to play together. Like
Yeah.
take their phones away and kick them out and get them on the playground and make them negotiate the rules of life and the rules of games. And when they offend one another, teach them to apologize. Teach them how to listen to other people. Because I don't know if he said it this way, but this is the way I've said it. Authenticity will be the currency of the age.
Wow.
When you can't trust anything that you see or hear, right?
Yeah.
And everything becomes suspect. I mean, how do our listeners know that you're really talking and I'm really talking,
Yeah.
right? And that's going to get worse and worse as the
Mhm.
technology gets better and better. And so trust is going to be a huge issue. And so authenticity, where I can really convince people of my humanity and behave in a truly human, and you used character, I might say
Yeah.
integrity. It's interesting. Author and authentic are same origin. That's what's going to make the difference, I think, for kids, when they can be in an environment with humans and be the best human in the environment.
Yeah.
That's going to be more important than being the best artificial intelligence in an environment. I
Yeah.
hope. I don't know where it's all going to go.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy. Well, I mean, and I think you're right, Andrew. When I look at like my children and them having their children, and I'm so proud of them because they limit the screen time severely, and they've already decided that there's no reason for them to have phones of their own for a long, 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 long time. And basically, once they start driving, there'll be like a family phone that'll go with them, where and then they comes back to the house, and it's again the family phone again, But I just think about all that they have to navigate through that I never even had to think about. Of
Yeah.
course, my kids wanted to be outside more than they wanted to be inside. We had two channels on our television, and that was it. There was nothing interesting going on indoors. So they wanted to be outside, and I think that bringing kids back to that and being intentional with the relationships and being intentional with books and music and just outdoor time and observation and like you said relational just learning how to play again is something that is just so important, which is why in my mind homeschooling has never been more important than it is right now.
Yeah. And parents are much more likely to be able to facilitate those distinctly human experiences that are
Yes.
so important for growing up. And schools, they're kind of dividing.
Hmm.
There's I would say there's three basic divisions of schools. Number one is the schools who just aren't really changing, and they are dying very, very rapidly.
They are.
Then there's schools that are embracing technology as fast as they can. And, that's just kind of wait, watch, and see what happens. Yeah, I think an AI tutor in algebra might be a really good way to get every kid learning math better. I don't like the screen element, but the irony is, of course, you and I are talking to each other over a screen. So,
Exactly.
but there's a distinctly human element to this. However, the other is the schools that are saying, we need to recapture the human things, the really human things.
Mm.
And that's the character, that's the story, that's the narrative, that's the identity, that's the spirit.
Mm.
And, you know, even if you aren't a Christian school, you can do that. In fact, I was just in a school yesterday in Denver. It's a public school. It's a charter school. They are really working on that element of how do we instill these human values and create the opportunity for kids to have really meaningful experiences that are not directed from a technology outside of humanity, but within our experience of teaching and learning and living together. And of course, a school can be good, but a homeschool is the place where you're going to get the greatest effect
Yeah.
of that distinctly human development. Hopefully, we will all, and our kids will all be able to navigate the continual influx of more and more technology and still retain those distinctly human things.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I think we're going to leave that right there. Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
well,
Andrew.
my pleasure. We could continue, I'm sure,
This could be a long conversation.
but the next time, I'm sure the perspectives will have changed.
Yep, we'll do this again in a month and have a whole different conversation, I'm sure. But we thank you so much, Andrew. And I just want to thank you personally for all that you do for the homeschooling community. And I know that you're always at our Mache convention. I mean, I think every year since I've been there, you've been there, but there
Well,
might be
not
one or
every year, but
most years. Yeah. And
I do love coming to Minnesota,
yeah,
and the Mache has always been a delightful one. And then, you know, just seeing you and other homeschool leaders at
yeah.
the other events. Keep up the good work, because
Thank
I
you.
do strongly believe that homeschool freedoms are the front line of parental
Yes.
rights. And if
100%.
those fall, and, you know, the surveillance society, the control of education, the control of children and people will just, it'll be out of control. And
Mhm.
that would be a very bad thing.
Yeah, we can't, and we just appreciate your support of state organizations, because they really are the ones all across the United States, the ones that are in the capital, making sure that homeschool freedoms are preserved in their states. And it's not an easy fight these days. I know in our
No.
state it's not an easy fight these days, but
God bless you
we're
and all
holding
the
the
Mache
line.
team. Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you so much for all that you do. And we just really appreciate you, and we appreciate IEW. For anybody who's listening, our listeners, you guys, as always, in the description of this podcast, there will be all the links to Andrew's things, and anything that you might need to know that would be interesting for you that pertains to this podcast. I just want to thank you all for listening to us today. I want to thank Andrew for being with us, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And hopefully we can get this message out there, and just really, thinking about AI, and kind of what that can mean to our families and our future and our children. But thank you so much, Andrew, for all that you do.